Welcome to the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. I'm your host, Dr. Matthew Tanner, the founder of Wounded Leadership Ministries. You know, the calling to shepherd God's church brings some of life's greatest joys and adventures. Yet this calling also comes with profound challenges. Many church leaders face those challenges in silence. Nearly every pastor will experience the pain of unjustified termination or forced resignation at least once in their ministry journey. On this podcast, we create a safe place where wounded leaders can share their stories, find community, and discover pathways toward healing and a renewed purpose. Each episode will bring honest conversations with those who have walked through the valley of ministerial suffering and emerged stronger on the other side. Whether you're currently serving in ministry, recovering from church trauma yourself, or simply want to better understand the challenges that are facing today's church leaders, this podcast is for you. It will offer biblical wisdom, practical strategies, and genuine hope. Now let's begin today's conversation. Well, I want to welcome you to the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. Our guest this morning is Deanna Harrison, founder of Pastors Hope Network and author of the book Moving On, Surviving the Grief of Forced Termination. If you look at Wounded Leadership's YouTube channel, we do have a video that we interviewed Deanna about the book. This is not about the book. This is about just the stories, because Deanna, you are someone who has also been wounded by the ministry, and this is just for you to tell your story. So we're just gonna, as if we're standing or sitting at a coffee shop, and you're telling me the story for the first time. Talk to me about where you want to start. How did you become a wounded pastor, wounded pastor's wife? Tell me about your story.
Well, thanks, Matthew. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. Let me give you a little bit of background, and that is my daddy was a pastor. So I grew up in a pastor's home. And then when I married my husband, I became a pastor's wife. And I have to say, I was the ideal pastor's wife. Seriously, I
The
was.
poster child.
I was. I loved teaching Bible classes.
Mm.
I loved I played the organ in for the church. I rang handbells. I sang in the choir. I loved making hospital visits, oddly
Wow.
enough. I was 100% in ministry alongside my husband. And after, I guess he had been in ministry about 30 years. We had been at a particular church for 7 years. When we went through what could only be described as a coup. There's just no other way
Mm.
to describe it. Came out of nowhere. We literally had no idea anything was wrong, that anybody was upset with us until my husband received an email of all things, not even face to face, but an email saying, you're going to need to resign. And this was just total shock.
Was he
Yeah,
the lead
he was,
pastor?
he was lead pastor, a large church, a large wealthy church, which we think as we looked back trying to make some sense of things, I think that probably played into some things. But literally overnight, from the time he got that email to the time we had to resign was 12 days.
Wow.
There,
So it was sudden.
very sudden. There there was no due process. Minds were already made up. And as we later learned, we were experiencing what in the secular world is called mobbing. And it's what Marcus Tanner refers to as termination, in that there had been a very specific process taking place that we were completely unaware was
Mm.
going on, starting with the secret meetings. And, my husband traveled. He went to conferences on behalf of the church and the denomination. When he was out of town, guess what? They were having their secret meetings. They were planning out this coup very carefully. Uh, so that when it occurred, we were totally blindsided. And so, yeah, it happened within 12 days. And the only way my husband could have defended himself, that he could have fought this, it would have required him divulging things that he knew in confidence. And he just said, "I can't do that. I will
Mm.
not do that. That would be sin."
So he couldn't
And
even, yeah, save his
I
own job.
right. I remember I overheard him talking to our daughter, and she said, "Well, Daddy, why didn't you fight?" And he said, "Because I would have had to
Wow.
divulge confidences." He said, "I will lose my home, my job, my reputation. I will lose everything before I will willingly do
Wow.
something that is sin." And I was overhearing this conversation thinking, "Yeah, why didn't you fight?" I mean,
Get him.
I was ready to claw somebody's eyes out. I mean, I was furious.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
something we don't talk about a lot in these stories is that the raw emotions that we try to baptize those. We try to hide those, but I mean, talk about those emotions, that roller coaster you go through.
ooh, well, anger was my
Mm,
number one emotion. I was so angry at what a small group within the church had done.
mm,
I was angry at how they had done it. Not one of these people who was a part of this forced termination, not one ever came to my husband and said, "Hey, I have this problem. Can we talk this out?" Not
wow.
one. They did not follow scriptural teaching of what to do if you have a problem with somebody. It was just bizarre. And these are the church leaders who are
Just
totally disregarding scripture. And that's okay.
it's
You
like,
know,
we're okay with this?
they were okay with that.
Mm,
Disregarded scripture, never came to him
mhm,
like the scripture clearly says we are to do.
mm,
I was angry at God for allowing it to happen. Like,
mm.
you could have stopped this. You could
Yeah,
have intervened, and for whatever reason, you chose not to. Yeah, so anger was right there at the top of my list of emotions. It's the one, Matthew. This has been, let's see, almost 16 years ago.
wow,
And there are certain triggers that anger will crop back up. So
100%.
it is something you have to deal with really for the rest of your life. The effects are long term, and has nothing to do with, oh, that's not Christian. No, doesn't Bible doesn't say that anger is a sin.
Mhm,
What you do with that anger can be the sin.
100%.
But
And yeah, that's something we don't talk about is the fact that you can hear a name, you can see a certain situation, and you're right back there,
oh yes,
16 years ago, right in
yep,
that same meeting, just and
yes.
having those same emotions.
Oh, yeah. We are, to give you a very up to date example of that, we're actually in the middle right now of doing some remodeling at our home. And the first thing we started with was the kitchen.
Of course.
And we had someone say, this particular shade, it's called celadon, I believe is what it is, but it's a shades of green. That's the end thing. I and I went ahead and I got a sample of tile from the store and brought it home and could not do it because our kitchen in our home 16 years ago had greens in it, and it
Yeah.
was a trigger. I cannot go with the color that supposedly is the in color now. Could not do it.
Wow.
All the sadness came back,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
100%.
Just a color of all
It
things,
does that surprise you? It's like, I should be able to be neutral about a color.
I know, but all of a sudden it reminded me of that home, and I love that home. I love the house, and
Yeah.
so but yeah, you mentioned we tend to baptize our emotions. And
Yeah.
one of the greatest things I heard a counselor say that she counsels a lot of ministers.
Mhm.
And she said a minister will come in and he will immediately spiritualize his grief or his whatever it is he's dealing with. She just says, no, 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 stop right there. Let's just sit here
Mm.
in that emotion.
Yeah.
Emotions are neutral. They just are. They
Mhm.
just exist. So let's just sit here and accept that you are grieving, that you are angry, that you are, you're in denial, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Stop spiritualizing it. This is what it is because I firmly believe until you own up to what it is, you're not gonna be able to deal with it.
That's the very reason for this podcast is that just share the story, sit in the hurt and in a safe place, safe way, remember that and just realize emotions are real. But
Yes.
then allow that to lead you to some avenues of healing. So,
Yes. Yes. The challenge for pastors' families who have been
mhm,
terminated, if they have been forced to sign a non-disclosure, that's a whole whole 'nother podcast
uh,
probably,
yes.
but if that's the case, you live in terror
Mhm.
of what are these people gonna do if they find out I've told somebody what really happened, you know?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
There and that's a very traumatic state to be in.
Yeah.
Um,
So going back to the story, I mean, this is just I've seen talked to some that it's like a slow drip, it's a slow build, slow boil.
yes, I
Yours was like a volcanic eruption. It just came out
yes.
of nowhere. And so you're left reeling. So pick back up in the
Yeah.
story from there.
Yeah, the difference is whether or not you're like a loved one has cancer and it's a long drawn out death or if they drop dead of a heart attack in an instant. It's like
Yeah,
very
great.
different responses. Yeah, for us it
Yeah.
was that jolt.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we took a little bit to just well, we were in shock. We were trying to get stabilized.
Yeah.
We did get a severance, which what we were grateful for.
Yeah.
Not every church does that. Um, I had a job. I worked for a nonprofit,
Mm.
so that right there tells you I wasn't making a lot, but I did have a job,
Yeah.
and I would continue going to work every day. God gave me wonderful coworkers. The day after all this came down, I went in. I went to my supervisor, and I said, "There was a meeting at the church last night." She's, "Oh, honey, the moment you said there's a meeting at the church, I knew it was gonna be bad," you know? And so, yeah,
How
she was
sad.
wonderful, but
Yeah.
they allowed me to continue coming to work and working in a fog.
Of course.
Yeah, but I continued my job, and then my husband would of course, he was looking for jobs. He was
Mhm.
trying to get his resume together, which is another incredibly painful thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you look to do your resume, you're obviously putting forth your very best.
Yeah.
And so you look at all these incredible things that you've accomplished at this church, and you're thinking, so what happened? Why am I here?
Yeah,
Um,
when you're also thinking about, well, as soon as I have to talk to the next church, they're gonna ask, "Why did you leave your last church?"
yeah, yeah. And so he would be at home doing those things, and we knew we would ultimately have to sell our house, so he'd be working on, you know, doing things at the house to get it ready to sell.
Uh-huh.
But when almost every day at work, I would make up some reason to call him because his grief was so intense that I really was afraid his heart was just gonna stop. I seriously was. So I would call him just to hear his voice, to make sure
Wow.
he was still with us, you know. I never thought that, "Oh, he's gonna do something to harm himself." But I
Thought the grief was gonna overwhelm him.
yes, I thought it was just gonna his heart was just gonna say, "I can't do this anymore." You know, it
Wow.
was just that the grief was that deep.
Mm.
I mean, these are people I mean, when you go through this, I mean, we could just list off the number of people we had walked through hell with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I remember one who was in the middle of it, and I thought, "Woman, we sat in your living room with your husband dying in a hospital bed right there in the living room. We
Uh-huh.
sat there right there with you, and we were there with you when he took his last breath.
Yeah.
I I never had any training for that.
Yeah.
I was there with you because I loved you, and we were walking up through this horrible journey with you.
Yeah.
And how could you knew us. How could you believe the lies that were told about us?
Yeah.
And I and so the grief is awfully intense.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah, and you
when that
find
happens.
yourself just saying, Why won't you speak? Why won't
Yes.
somebody stand up?
Right.
Tell the
Yeah.
truth.
Yes. And nobody did.
Wow.
So so we muddled through for several months,
Mhm.
just and then my husband finally just said, I I want to move back to our home state. I want to move back to family, to where
Yeah.
people know us
Mhm.
and people love us, and they're not going to believe these things. And
Yeah.
so we uh we started working on that, trying
Yeah.
to sell our house, all the packing. We were moving ourselves, and if you haven't ever done that, that's a fun thing to experience, and the cost is pretty expensive. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we were selling things right and left if they weren't nailed down. So, we just got rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The During this time, and even now, my mind's kind of going all over the place. When you tell your story, yeah, it's just
Like,
going like a ping pong ball.
for sure.
One of the things that was so disappointing and painful is that people in our denomination would not return phone calls. They would not answer emails. They
Yeah.
wouldn't respond to emails. It was this total silence. I don't remember who it was that said it, but someone pointed out that my husband had pastored a wealthy church in the state.
Mhm.
Denominational offices depend upon the financial support of the churches in their state, and they needed the church to continue supporting them.
Wow.
So that's where they sided. That's where their allegiance was. But the fact that they wouldn't even call and say, "Man, I'm so sorry." They didn't have to
Mm.
take sides, but there wasn't even a, "I'm so sorry this happened." Nothing. It's just that again was mind-boggling to me
Mhm.
that these are godly Christian people supposedly. And so that's been very disappointing, but I've
Mm.
heard that story a lot in my work, and that is that you get ostracized by other pastors as though you're contagious. You get ostracized by your denomination.
Mm. So it's
It's
double betrayal,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
you know? You really don't, I mean, you feel like I mean, you really don't have anybody to turn to.
No, you don't. At least at that time. At that time,
And
there is
right.
there's a place now you can. But at that time, there was nowhere to turn but literally our blood family, and I had one best friend, one
Wow.
friend. She's still my best friend to this day. She would answer my call anytime, any place. She would, man, talk me off the ledge. She's my best friend.
Wow.
But we eventually sold our house
Mhm.
and moved back to our home state. Even now, can you tell I'm not mentioning state names by
Yes.
identification? Yes. This
I
is
understand
this is
that.
how
It's
the trauma stays with you, you know?
100%. It
I
never
don't want
leaves you.
I don't want anybody at that church to say, "Oh, you were talking about us." Well, how do you know? I
I
didn't call
didn't
a name. I didn't even say a denomination. I didn't say a state. So, you know,
Well,
but it
it's empowering to tell the story, and again, that's why we're doing the stories in the podcast because it does make you push through that trauma of what are they gonna think? If are they gonna find out? All of
uh-huh,
those different things. Yeah,
yeah,
I still have people today. I've obviously been through it, and I still have people to this day send emails that to other ministries that I go to. Do you know this about them? It just follows you, and that's been 20 15 years ago.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
S-
So we sold our house. We packed up all of our stuff in U-Hauls,
Mhm.
in a U-Haul, and I mean, it was just a surreal feeling to move back to our home state, and my husband was driving this enormous truck,
Mm.
and you don't dare stop and spend the night somewhere with all your belongings
Right.
packed up. or you
Right.
wake up the next morning and the truck's gone. I have heard those stories. So, I mean, I'm following behind him, and it was just so surreal that we have no home. We
Like,
have no job.
what's
Y
happening here?
Yes. Anyway, my precious father-in-law just said, "I've got this big old house by myself. Come live with me." And he was a
Wow.
widower, so we moved back and put all of our stuff in storage units,
So you
and
have a home, but you don't have a home.
yeah, we moved in with my father-in-law, and
Mhm.
that is by if someone is living with a relative, by definition, they're still homeless.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So we moved into his guest bedroom, and he had set up a little office for us so we could work in there during the days to do a job search. But literally overnight, it seemed like we had gone from having this beautiful multi-level home
Mm.
to living in one room of somebody else's house.
Yeah.
It
And
it
still
was
not understanding why. It's like still no reason or no tangible thing.
just it was so surreal. Um, and yet
Yeah.
that was where we were. Now, I will tell you, 16 years later, I look back and I wouldn't give anything for those months we lived with my father-in-law
Wow.
because I rel I before then, I just knew him. We weren't close because we would see him on, holidays.
Yeah.
And how do you develop a long-term relationship when it's just we see you, a couple times a year on holidays? Living with him, I just grew to love him and see him on a whole different level. And
Mm.
yeah, just a precious, precious man. And so after the fact, I was very grateful and I
Wow.
wouldn't trade it. But boy, in the thick of it,
I'm not so
so
grateful at the moment.
no, no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so every morning we would get up and go online and look for jobs, work on our resumes. And we were in the big metropolitan area. We found a professional networking group. It was a bunch of professionals who had lost their jobs. And so it, the
A secular thing?
yes, yes. And so, well, yes, because denominational leaders don't admit there's a problem. So, yes, this was a secular thing.
The
And
world has figured this out.
so we would we'd go to these weekly meetings and and always, I mean, there were like probably 200 people come to these
Wow.
meetings. And
Wow.
so it was very reassuring that we weren't the only ones who had lost jobs.
Mm.
These other people had been laid off or whatever. We were all in the same boat trying to, move forward.
Trying to survive.
Yes. And that helped us and that we made us get up and get dressed and be presentable and go out and be around people. That helped
Yeah.
tremendously. The other thing while living with my father-in-law that helped was getting a job. And I was applying everywhere for full-time jobs. And I thought, I have got to get out of the house. So first, I went to a temp agency but they were sending me one of their clients was a mortgage company. So they would send me to these mortgage companies to work the front desk. So all day I was watching these happy couples come in to sign the final closing documents on their new home.
And be anger.
Ye
Oh, every
Yes, it was horrible. It was like pouring salt on the wound. And,
Ugh.
and then I'd go home to my little, the little thing they did. And,
You're like,
so
"Congratulations on your new home."
yes, yeah, yeah. I hope you enjoy it, Yeah. So, and all this time just wondering
Mm,
what God was doing, just
mm,
not having a clue.
mm,
Um, so finally one day I thought, I can't do these temp jobs anymore.
mhm.
So I was online. I found there was a large Christian bookstore chain that was hiring. So man, I put in my application and I got all dressed up and walked in the store and they said, "Oh, no, we don't have any positions. They just really collect resumes." Are you kidding me? So
Wow.
I was so angry. I went back out to the car and I thought, "Okay, I'm gonna do something." And at
Mhm.
that time, Lifeway had stores,
Mhm.
you know, and they've since gone away, but at that time, Lifeway
Yeah.
had stores, and I drove to a Lifeway, and I just walked in and said, "Hey, how you are?" And the first guy said, "No, I'm not, but I think the one in this other metropolitan area, this other store might be
Mhm.
hiring."
Mm.
So I drove over to that one, and I don't take this it's kinda conniving, but I walked and I knew when they said, "Hi, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, is your manager in?" And she said, "Well, what can I tell him this is about?"
Yeah.
Well, I knew if I said, "I'm looking for a job," she would say, "We're not hiring," and I'd never get past the front desk, So
Right.
this is the truth. I mean, I wasn't lying. I said, "I'm one of your authors, and
Yeah.
I would like to just say hi," which was true.
Was
My stuff that I had published was on the shelves at Lifeway, and so I while she went to get the manager, I wandered over and found those things, and I'm just trying to
See?
trying to keep my wits about me,
Yes.
but this wonderful man came out as the manager came out, said, "Hey," and I said, "I just wanted to meet you, and I am one of your authors." And I said, "My husband and I are transitioning back to the state, and I'm looking for part-time work." Well, he hired me on the spot, but he said,
So it
"Now,
worked.
so whatever." He said, But come back in the morning. I have to do the official Lifeway interview."
Right. Yeah. We have a
Yeah.
checklist we have to go
Yes.
through.
Yes. So I went back the next morning, and we're in his office, and he's going through these, typical questions. And then he says, "Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?"
What a tough question.
And I just, I stopped, and tears just immediately came to my eyes. And
Wow. I
I
don't
said,
know.
probably about a year ago, if you'd asked me that question, I could have told you."
Mhm.
I said, "But I have no idea." And I just told him, that's when I told him our whole story.
Wow.
How I had gotten to be in his office applying for a part-time job.
Mm.
And turns out his dad had been a minister and had
Mm.
gone through something similar. So he
Wow.
knew exactly where I was coming from. I stayed at that store and worked there for months. That that is where I started to heal.
Mhm.
Um, the other employees, there were a lot of college students, who worked there,
Wow.
and 2 of those students, well, now one is a pastor. She's just taken her first associate pastor position. Another
Mhm.
one is married to a pastor and has a baby. They are still part of my life, and this is 16 years later
That's
because
beautiful.
they were so they were so kind to this woman who could have been their mom, teaching me how to set up displays, how to run the registers, whatever you even call those computer things now, you
Yeah.
know. Um, just that's where I started to heal, was
Wow.
being out and being with these people who didn't even know my story. I didn't tell them my story. Uh,
Mm.
yeah. And then I don't know, towards the end of the year, my husband found a job in the nonprofit world in another town, so we wound
Yeah.
up moving there, and we both after we moved there, I got a job in the nonprofit world, and for 9 years, I mean, I was hired as the development officer at a Habitat for Humanity,
Wow.
and this is where we literally reinvented our lives from being a pastor and pastor's wife to being we're in the nonprofit world,
Yeah, I've never done
and
this before.
yeah. Well, much of it is similar to churches that are
Mhm.
actually nonprofits, but
Mhm.
still a very different world. And I was hired to work alongside the development director at this
Mm.
particular habitat. And my first week on the job, he took a 3-month leave of absence and never came back. So I find myself in the deep end of the pool, paddling as fast as I can to even learn fundraising and development work. And thankfully, my
Yeah.
boss sent me to all the different trainings in town and met a lot of wonderful people. And, um, you know, a lot of development is about building relationships. I knew how to do that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and so, but that's where I was for 9 years. I was at Habitat. My husband worked in nonprofits and he also preached. He would, on the weekends, he served countless churches as their interim pastor. While in that denomination, when the church loses a pastor, they bring in somebody like as the full-time substitute
Yeah.
until they find another pastor.
Mm.
Every church where he did that, they all wanted him to stay as their pastor. And he's like, I'll be here on the, temporarily, but
No
yeah,
thanks.
he never felt like God was calling him to do that. So that's where we were for 9 years. And there were times in those 9 years where I thought, God, why am I here? I don't, what am I doing? This at the end of 9 years, when God called me to start Pastors Hope Network, it was like a light bulb went off, and I thought, this is what God has been doing for 9 years. I have been in training because I had been at Habitat, at our Habitat, our team worked very closely together. I worked under the CEO very, very closely. I worked with the accounting department very closely. I worked
Yeah.
with the program. I mean, I I had been in training
Mm.
to actually start and run a nonprofit, and I had no if God had told me that 9 years prior,
Yeah.
I'd have gone running in the opposite direction, but he
Yeah.
graciously trained me for what he had for me that
Yeah.
he knew was coming, I didn't know was coming, and I had an Old Testament professor at Baylor who said, "Knowing God's will is looking backwards and saying, 'So that's what you were
That's
doing.'"
that's what you meant by all that.
Yes, and I thought,
Yeah.
this is why God's had me here." And the
Mm.
number of times in my as the founder and executive director of Pastors Hope Network, the number of times I have thought back and said, "What would what would my boss at Habitat have done?"
Mhm.
And that's what I've done
Wow.
because I learned so much from him, not knowing I was learning so much from him. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Quite a journey. I don't know that I don't know that I would have chosen this
Mm.
because there was so much pain from my husband. That's what still makes me very sad
Yeah.
because he's an incredible preacher.
Mhm.
Incredible. And that makes me sad. But the flip side of that sadness
Mm.
is seeing that God brings beauty out of the ashes, out of the destruction. He takes the rubble and builds something beautiful out of it.
Yeah. How does
Um,
seeing that beauty when you finally discover that, how does that help you finally, I guess, look forward? Does that make sense?
it helps in that I know God is using all the pain. He's using it for his glory. And I heard Chuck Swindoll say one time, God's will for your life is not that you be happy, it's that you glorify him.
Yeah.
That is God's will for your life. And I truly believe that he is using all of our pain for his glory. And so, okay, you
Yeah.
know,
I
um,
have a phrase that I use all the time, finding purpose in the pain. And sometimes just the fact that God can somehow be glorified in all of this in
mhm,
some way, sometimes that's all I have, and sometimes that's enough.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, for God to use it and to realize that this is the story. This is my
Uh,
story. This is
yeah.
my journey. And we one thing that was very helpful in our journey is looking back and saying, for both of us, we believe God is pleased with how we handled the termination.
That's huge.
He's pleased that we did not destroy the church, which we could have done.
Yeah.
Had he shared some things that he knew, it would have destroyed relationships. We didn't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We just quietly left.
Wow.
Because yeah, to do otherwise would have caused too much destruction and damage. And so to be able to look back and say, We have no regrets with how we handled what was done to us," uh,
Uh,
that that's worth a lot.
you know, we could go on for hours. There's so
We've been
much.
known to do that, Matthew, in our conversations.
I have so much more that questions, but we are running out of time in this episode. So I'm just going to go ahead and say we're going to have you back and have more of the conversation, more of the story. Um, so again, the purpose of the podcast, Stories from the Wounded, is just to share the hurt, the heart, the beauty, all of the things, all the raw stories. What would you share to pastors, pastors' wives, pastors' family that have been through it? They feel isolated, afraid to tell their story. What advice would you give them?
Oh, what advice? Well, first of all, rest assured God is not through with you. A church may have just destroyed your self-confidence and have told you that God can never no, don't believe any of that.
Mm.
God is not through with you. I have no idea what he's going to do in your journey, but God is not through with you and he will
Mhm,
redeem your pain. A piece of advice I would give now that I didn't have 16 years ago, but in the
mhm,
mental health field, I
mhm,
would say go to your family doctor, tell them what's happening. And if your family doctor says you need to be on this prescription,
mhm.
then do it. There
It's
is n
okay.
It's okay. Traumatic experiences can do awful things to you physically
Uh,
and the way we're made up, and it can throw things out of balance, and don't say, "God's gonna get me through." Yeah, God's gonna get you through it, and he may very well use your family physician to do it, you know?
right.
If at all possible, find a counselor and have somebody, because a counselor may be the only safe person you can talk to right now.
Absolutely.
But yeah, get as much help as you can to get through this.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I want to put this out there as we close. You can obviously, those that are listening to this can go to woundedleadership.com. Also, Deanna, if they want to get a hold of your ministry, how do the listeners do that?
On our website, it's pastorshopenetwork.org. We are an organization, we're a 501(c)(3). We just provide practical resources to help ministers' families get through a termination, a sudden
Mhm.
loss of a ministry position. Because as you know, and probably all your listeners know, when that happens, you lose not just your job, but you lose your faith community and your social community, and you lose it all. And you need somebody, you need a small team to walk alongside you to get you through.
Absolutely.
We just have some very practical resources to help you get stabilized. Yeah, just gonna
Yeah.
say one
So, yeah, go ahead.
pastorshopenetwork.org is our website. There is a
Excellent.
help request form there that people can fill out. It comes to me and to our director of pastoral care,
Mhm.
and we'll then reach out to you and get things rolling to get you the help you need.
Excellent. We're going to put that website in the links, all the links in as we post this episode. In the comments, you'll be able to see the links to Pastors Hope Network. Deanna, thank you for your story. Thank you for what you are doing. And I just pray for Pastors Hope Network. We talked about earlier before we started recording, we wish we weren't needed. We
Yeah.
wish we didn't have to do this, but we do. And
Yes.
so if you have been wounded, if this story resonates with you, reach out to Pastors Hope Network. Deanna, thank you for your time and being willing to share your story on this episode.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you guys. As you listen to these episodes, please like, share, comment. That's how the word gets out. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. We hope today's conversation has given you valuable insight into how vulnerability and resilience work to shape truly authentic leadership. Remember, our wounds don't define us. Every scar tells a story of survival, and every setback creates an opportunity for extraordinary growth. If today's episode resonated with you, please visit us at woundedleadership.com, where you're going to find resources, community forums, opportunities to share your own leadership journey. I also invite you to subscribe, rate, review this podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us to reach more leaders who might be struggling in silence. Till next time, this is Dr. Matthew Tanner reminding you that your wounds can become your greatest source of wisdom, connection, and strength. It's the Wounded Leadership Podcast, transforming wounds into wisdom, one story at a time.